Thank you. My esteemed panelists are coming on. So we have Angeline from Singapore Airlines. She runs customer experience. And for all of you who are now thinking, ooh, maybe I can ask about my next flight or, or complain about the website, forget it, right? Sam Kim, after 30 years at P&G, he now is CEO of Dairy Farm Southeast Asia. And we have Jess, who's Regional Vice President of Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Right, so today we're here to talk about customer experience and to set the context while we talk about delivering hyper-relevant customer experiences. I wanted to talk about a study that was done in the 80s about broken windows, because that's very much the approach that I look at customer experience with, which is that when you have a single broken window in a neighborhood, the LAPD found that very quickly crime went up in that neighborhood because it signified to people that no one was paying attention, right? So in every customer experience as well, there are these little broken windows that you don't pay too much attention to, but then they stay broken, and then you start to lose customers because your whole journey is going to shit, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about it. I'm going to ask the panelists, starting with Jess, to kick off giving their point of view, and then we'll go from there.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for having me today. I think this topic is probably one of the ones that I'm the most passionate about. But I think we would all agree in the audience that we know customer experience is important now. We don't need to sit here and talk about it anymore and go, is it, isn't it? And I think today in the panel, I'd love to be able to challenge each other to go, how do we take the conversation beyond just customer experience is important? We do a research piece every year at Salesforce called the Connected Customer, the State of the Connected Customer, which is really a big research piece between consumers and brands around what's customer experience and what are you expecting. And interestingly enough, this year, there wasn't just a lot of people agreeing that customer experience was important. It actually started to push the envelope and say, it's not just important. 75% of the people that responded said, I actually expect an enhanced experience that will raise the bar in every single different category. And as soon as I have that experience, I won't have an experience with any other brand unless it's raised to that same level. So it's almost like, how do we in our different industries challenge each other to consistently raise the bar? Because if we're not doing that, our customers are going to be expecting it anyway. So 73% said that's what they were looking for. But actually, the reality was about 51% of their experiences were like that. So it's interesting to see what the expectation and then I guess what the delivery is. And I think as brands, whether it be services or products, how are we thinking about not only raising the bar for our brands, but in our industries as well? Because we're being disrupted and customers are going to expect it. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of interested to see your thoughts on today as well.
Shall I start first?
Yes, Ange, tell us what you think.
Okay, I guess in Singapore Airlines and with the digital transformation and also, as you mentioned, all the disruption, one thing we're very mindful of as we adopt and go digital in all fronts in SIA, we are very mindful that we do not dehumanize our interaction with our customers. Having said that, in fact, we want to leverage on technology and data and design thinking and even with agile methodology to really fully understand our customers before we can even do anything for them. Know their needs, inspire them to travel by sending them relevant promotions and even be there when they need us, be empathetic and helpful during their times of need, anticipate their next course of action, be prepared, do things that delight them when we can. And of course, end of the day is really to make sure that the journey with SIA is a memorable travel experience. And I guess what is really important is really that human touch. Yeah.
Good afternoon. For many of you, you may not be familiar with Dairy Farm because many of my friends who, when I joined Dairy Farm, thought that I was now working for some milk ranch. Actually, Dairy Farm is the one of the biggest pan-Asia retailer that we have. It's over 100 years old, and in fact, it did start as a dairy farm, raising cows to provide better quality milk to Singapore. And in order to do that, to improve that experience, then we went to build cold storage, which is now the cold storage supermarkets, but initially it started as a cold storage to store milk. So we've been involved in improving customer experience over 100 plus years ago with brands like Cold Storage, Giant, Guardian, 7-Eleven, Starbucks, and many other brands that we run here in Singapore and across a dozen countries in Asia. Now, as Krishnan mentioned, I used to work for Procter & Gamble, and I think back in late 90s, the chairman and the CEO at the time talked about winning the 2 moments of truth, which is about the first moment when the shopper sees your product in the store and gets to know your product. And then the second moment of truth happens at your home when you use that product and see if it's as good as what the manufacturer promises to you. Fast forward 2 decades later in this connected world that we live in, I believe we now have 4 moments of truth. Starting with a 0 moment, when you pull out your phone and check out what's selling in the store, so what brands that you might want to try, and you have all the information you ever need, and probably more in your hands. Then you go to the store and get to know that brand, and then you bring it home, use that brand. And then the 4th moment of truth, which is also important, is us trying to encourage you to tell your friends about it through your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever means of social media that you do these days. So in retail, we have gone from creating transactions, creating sales transactions where we simply sell you the product, to creating relationship. That starts far in advance from your home and finishes actually back at your home in your hands. And that's the transformation that we're going through in retail today, starting with raising cows over 100 years ago.
Thanks, Sam. So, considering both of you talked about the fact that you very clearly want to deliver a unique experience. You want to deliver some value to the customer. But let me now put a problem in front of you. You have very little control over that experience, right? So with the airline, let's take the day of travel. There are people in the crowd saying, oh yeah, the SQ website, but we won't go there, right? You have, so the day of travel, you get started. That's the important part of the journey, right? The day of travel. You control what happens in Changi at the counters. You control what happens on the plane. And once the person arrives, it's the hands of a completely different airport. The baggage delivery, all of that. So while the experience is attributed to you, you don't have that much control. So how do you deal with that?
Krishnan, yeah, absolutely right. Just as I mentioned, what we really set out to achieve is really to make sure that the customer's journey with SIA is really a pleasant one. But having said that, it's definitely very difficult to achieve because we have many things that's out of our control. Take the airport ecosystem, for example. There's the security systems, your immigration queue, your gate hold room, how many times you walk to a gate and complaining about the airline having a gate that is parked so far away. So many things that are totally out of our control, but you know what? Our customers don't really care. So to them, it is the airline's fault. So they will associate with a brand. And going back to Jess' point about expectation, with all this modern technology and also with digitalization, many things have changed, including the expectations. Customers are less patient nowadays. They have a lot more options. They are more discerning. They understand a lot of things better. But to me, what it really takes to deliver that good customer's experience is really be relevant. I mean, you have to walk in their shoes, behave like them, understand their needs, and walk through the whole transactions and all the various touch points about what they are going through. Be empathetic, think like them. And even if it's not within our control, I think what we try to do and strive to do is really communication, to manage their expectation. Because this is something that many a times things go wrong or things are not being managed well, is because the communication level is not there. Yeah, and of course, bottom line is really you have to understand your customers. And with technology and data, this is getting easier and more effective.
I think the interesting part about that, and I'd love to see some nods potentially in the audience as well, is that all has to be powered and underpinned by technology. And I'm going to be biased because I'm from Salesforce, so these are the things that I have to say. But I truly believe, because I get to meet with customers every single day, that we've got to stop talking about, hey, we need a connected experience and we've got to make it real time. And there's got to be change agents in organizations. Sam's just told us he's launched a huge change project in his organization, that you have to just take a stand and start to say the old systems that we have had in our business cannot enable what the customer expects, but also what our employees expect. I love what you just shared about how Singapore Airlines doesn't necessarily own every part of that. But I'm seeing so many brands start to disrupt that, to say, even though I don't own that, I'm going to put the tools in the different types of vendors' hands to make sure that my customer gets that seamless experience across it all, so that we can connect those experiences. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how you not only make a technology change, but a people change, and how you do it fast.
Well, I think it's all about understanding what the customer needs are and starting really spending the time with customers, both in a qualitative and quantitative manner, particularly with all the data available, of starting with what they want. And in retail, it really is about ultimately trust. Do I trust to buy products from you? Because that's what I'm asking. I'm asking people to come and give me money at the end of the day. And that has to be based on the quality of the products that we offer. It's a service that we provide and the value that they get. And if we can do that better than anybody else, then we'll build a trust with our customers. And ultimately, that trust is what's going to keep them coming, regardless of the number of products that we sell.
So we've talked a bit about delivering the experience for the customer. But when you're looking at how you're building that experience, and when you're thinking about how that experience is connected up, how much effort is going into making sure that there is a feedback loop that keeps you constantly listening? I'm not getting any money from Salesforce, I can promise you that. And how many of you think Jess has contracts in the name of Dairy Farm in her bag that she's going to get him to sign? But no, tell us about this, about feedback, right? Because I know you're getting a lot. You get emails from everybody, but...
Okay, can I start first? Because we just had a transformation route at SIA recently. And for those that can identify, because we used to issue this pen and paper survey on board. And I'm happy to announce that we have gone digital. And with digital, our reach is so much more and so much more real time. But what we are also mindful of is that I guess many of you can also relate to this, that we don't want to go into an era of survey fatigue. Nowadays, anything that I do, I always get a survey at the end of the website interaction, after a pizza order calls or anything like that. So it has to be done just right and without annoying the customers. And even with feedback loop, when we design the survey questions, and that has to be reviewed with a lot of care. Because if the question is too long, people get tired, they don't want to fill up, and they abandon the whole survey. But if it's too short, we get no insights out of it. The typical NPS question is a very broad kind of advocacy questions, but then it doesn't really help us identify that broken window that you talk about. So there has to be a nice balance.
The great news about working in retail is that everybody has an opinion. So it's actually a really good way to solicit opinions. Actually, a lot of it comes from the data analytics that we have. We have literally millions of customers walking into the thousands of stores that we have across our network here in Asia. And that in itself gives us a tremendous amount of data on customer preference, customer likes, dislikes, where the trends are going. On top, obviously, we have significant different ways to get the analytical data out, from surveys to actually the POSs that we have, and of course, in terms of our membership programs. So through those approaches, I think what's also important is what I get actually when I have a chance to sit down and listen to housewives or our shoppers. And I do that in the stores, which I go out every week, as well as, of course, in different qualitative settings. And when you have that rich amount of data, the important thing is not only having that data, but how are you going to act on it? And I think that's been our focus. It's very easy to get piles and piles of data, but simply if you don't change, it doesn't matter. So the key thing is actually to distilling it down to a few priorities that you can consistently actually act on and make a difference day in, day out. And ultimately, where are the areas that you want to do? For example, in dairy farm today, my biggest focus is on our fresh produce. In the end, it's what customers put in their mouth that's most important, and that gets started with the vegetables, fruits, it's the fish, and it's the meat that we sell. And we know that we have some opportunities that we need to improve upon, both from the qualitative data as well as from our market shares. So that's the first place that we're working on.
Thank you. Jess, what do you think? Talk about the feedback loop.
Well, I think I want to say something a little bit provocative here. It's not that I agree with it, but it was an interesting thing that a customer said to me today, a beauty retailer. We were talking about the connected customer journey and how they're using Salesforce to connect that experience. And they said to us, our sales for some reason are dropping. And so we've decided that all of the customer experience initiatives that we've spent so long building out, the life cycle stages, caring about the relationship, not just selling, we've switched it all off because I need to sell. I got to make some money. So I don't know how...
That's not us.
Yeah. No, it wasn't Sam. But it's interesting because as soon as they did that, their sales went up. And I think why I'm sharing that around the feedback loop is we've got to stop with the instant gratification expectation. I think there is definitely going to be buyer fatigue if you start to blast your customers with the one-off message. And although that may have a single blip, it's that long-term feedback loop of what's that consistent change that I'm going to create by dedicating my organization to completely changing that customer experience for the long term, even though the short term it may hurt us slightly. And I love the two different shifts of that. We work with another airline, not a competitor of yours. They fly in a different area of the world. And they actually made a statement to their board and to their shareholders saying, we are actually going to have a dip in revenue because we're going to shift gears. We're not going to do flash sales. We're not going to flog our flights for the lowest possible price. We're going to invest in customer experience. And so they kind of set their organization up for this complete change. To the point where the story that I think underpins how customer experience is their total focus, one of their amazing high status flyers walks into the lounge and says, I'd like this newspaper. They don't have the newspaper available. They're using Salesforce, so the person in the lounge messages the flight attendant on the flight, and by the time that guy has left the lounge and is sitting in the business class chair on his flight, they have that newspaper. And so, this is a long-term transformation journey that the airline went on, but I can assure you that frequent business class flyer is going to tell everyone and is going to consistently be dedicated to that flight. Now, you go back to the retailer that I spoke about who was like, I got to switch that relationship stuff off because I got to make me some money. How do you balance that? And, who's right and who's wrong? I think that's an interesting thing to think about as brands because to your point, that feedback loop isn't something that has to be instant satisfaction, I think, sometimes. So, yeah, how do you balance the...
Well, I don't think it's a trade-off. I think sales come from actually improving overall experience. As I said before, retail in general is changing from creating demands for transactions to relationships. It's across the board, although as brand people, we hate the fact that the loyalty is going down, but it's just true. Because simply, customers have significant more access to different brands, different ways of consuming and purchasing things than ever before. Because of that, and particularly the growth of online, that means that to keep customers' business, retaining that customer is incredibly becoming more difficult. If we don't change from creating transactions to relationships, we simply will not be able to sustain for a long time.
I'd like to take the point on the brand because in SIA, we used to have a saying that we want to deliver service that other airlines talk about. But nowadays, we realize that the competition is not just within the airline industry. It's actually about brand values and brand promise. Because every time when a customer has a positive experience with a brand, they tend to use that as a benchmark. And they will use it to compare with the next brand that they next interact with, and that's not necessarily from within the same industry. So every time when we use the feedback channel, And unlike retail, because our interaction and engagement with the customers is a much longer journey. And from the time they purchase right up to the time they consume and we fulfill the product, it's really a very long process. So definitely with the right technology, use of data and the right tools, it really helps to shrink up all these various experiences together. Because we have seen through data that our customers have gone to the website and then they couldn't succeed in doing certain things that they want to do. They have ended up with other channels, and end of the day, what do you know? I mean, they end up with a face-to-face channel that they want to get their things done.
Because they tried the app and that didn't work, and then they called the number and that didn't work, and then they showed up at ION and...
No, it's because we have the SI goal, so everything happens on board, and that's where the magic begins. But yeah, jokes aside, really, end of the day, even with technology and data, what is really important is really still that human touch. Yeah, I think that's something that we don't deny, and also the empathy, because I guess with computer right now, it's still quite difficult to deliver the empathy. Maybe with AI, we do have a little hope, but I don't think that we can go anywhere near human touch.
I mean, if you think about the fact that I think YouTube is now the second biggest search engine, and I think Amazon's the third biggest, it's a very different world out there now. That customers are actually starting to judge you, not based on the millions of dollars that advertisers like Procter & Gamble are spending on airwaves, but actually they are looking at number of likes. You know, are you getting 4.8 out of 5 or 4.2? In the last decade, the customers have become trained based on 5.0 scales, right? And in how many likes you get or how many thumbs down you get. It's a very, very different way that customers are behaving in terms of the experience. Not about the real experience anymore. They're actually already experiencing, to my point, before they even leave their homes.
So interesting you bring that up. Let's dig deeper on that one, right? Because of that, because customers now are listening to, let's call it hearsay, right? What about the role that fake news plays in impacting customer experience? You guys went through this recently, right? With the seat back camera thing. Remember that? So it was an incident, I don't know if you guys remember it. Passenger spotted a camera on the seat back screen in Singapore Airlines, took a picture, posted it saying, oh my God, are they looking at us and spying on us? Because yeah, that's what the airline wants to do, wants to watch you sitting in an economy seat for 12 hours. No, but so this became something that distracted from the airline, right? You had to deal with it, you had to explain what it was about, and so how do you deal with the customers basing their decisions on that, on what they hear, and balancing it with the truth?
Okay, back to the camera. No, that's not the data that we are collecting at that touch point, so I just want to clarify. But yeah, I think end of the day, it boils down to trust. Because even with the data that our customers are providing to us, it's really a lot about trust, because with data privacies and all the information that we can gather at our fingertips right now. So with the trust and also with the right communications, I guess that is the key to really addressing all these various unsettling concerns. But one of the key things which is troubling me, because we have seen from research, customers are telling us that they like to see promotion that is very relevant to them, that know them, and because no customers are alike, they are unique in their own sense. So they want to be able to get relevant information and to inspire them to travel on us. And yet, on one hand, when they are asked in the form or when they fill out a questionnaire on whether they want to receive that marketing promotion, they are always apprehensive about ticking that box. So that is the part that I do have a problem, and we still struggle with, because that marketing reach to these people and using the data that is relevant to you, I think is still a constant challenge. So end of the day, it's really that trust.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about personalization, right? Let's talk about personalization versus customization, where you give people X choices and they get to choose, or you use what you know to make it actually personalized, hyper-relevant.
This is a topic of passion for me, so I'll take this one. let's go back to what Angeline said a little while back around the values of a company and how customers are buying into what a company stands for again. I think that's a piece that we need to pick up on and link to this along with trust. Because I think a lot of us are happy to have an exchange of data or an exchange of value if we believe that trust and value is coming back at us. And a lot of that isn't just because the product is good or the service is good. Fundamentally, people are starting to challenge brands about who are you and what do you stand for, not just for a product, but in the community and a change in the world. And I know that sounds very sweeping, but the Connected Customer report that I mentioned to you, for the first time, we had in the top 4 key trends of what a customer is expecting and their experience with brands, that actually brand values came up as one of the top 4 things that they care about. So not only are we now struggling with this whole technology and trying to work out what we do with data, we've also got to balance that with being a values-driven organization. And it's a huge challenge, but I think when you get technology and data, trust and values all humming at the same time, customers aren't distracted by anything like, oh, should I tick that box? They're ticking that box 5 times because they're like, give me more. I trust you. This value exchange is what I want. And if all of you think about your favorite brand that you're really passionate about, I would give Netflix every piece of information, because when I get home at 9 p.m. and I want to sit there and like not even consider what I need to watch because Netflix decides, awesome. That value exchange is real. So I think I don't know if that's really answering your question, but I do think as brands there's a really interesting exchange between what are you doing with technology to personalize, and that's a really big piece that we need to address. What are you doing about making sure that you've got trust at the center of that, and technologies like Salesforce and various others that you're using, this is our number 1 value. This is all we care about. I get a little plug in there.
That's the last time you're going to sell.
I only said Salesforce twice so far. My PR manager's nodding at the front here like, go Jess. And then the third thing is very much around that values piece. So I think from a personalization perspective, as soon as we have that beautiful nirvana of that, convergence of those things, no one even questions the idea of, what do I want to give that data or not? So I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I certainly do in my life feel that that's a key piece.
I think I would take it out of context from data as much as it's what happens particularly in a retail environment. Certainly it's online is one thing, but still most of the world is offline. And personalization really means it's personal service. So are we providing the quality, service, and value that I want as a person coming into your store? That means doing a better job understanding what our customer wants are, what the needs are, what they desire, and really delivering that with better, excellent execution that no one else can do. So that's where the personalization is. I think, in a sense, it's a journey to really being able to provide personal service and personal value that we want to seek.
So is there also an element, are you guys looking at data that's not related to your industry? So, what types of communities are living in particular regions of country you're in, so making sure that the inventory in that cold storage is slightly different from another. Is that a way to do customization?
Yeah, so data is, I think, again, I would separate the 2 things. We use data to make sure that we're serving the customers that are coming in large. But in the end, when I come into the store, I'm a person. I'm not a group, right? So it's about training our team members that work in the store to provide you with the service that they deserve. When they get in the line, for example, in Indonesia, we have a line that it's called green line, and if we see more than 2 people that happens to be standing behind the line, then we immediately open another counter. Why? Because we want to provide that personal service. It's about going to our pharmacy in our Guardian stores and saying, being treated and providing advice as a person that they need. So doing the range work to provide the products that customers want from a customization standpoint is one thing, but ultimately it's about the service and value that each person wants to have in providing that. In cold storage, for example, if someone asks, where can I find a ketchup? We have a rule. We don't point out where that row is. We actually said, let me take you over there. That's what I mean by personalization. That's what I think ultimately it's all about.
Thanks.
But okay, I'd like to add. To me, customization is really just a broad level of delivering that level of service that is catered to that segment of customer. So take the airline, for example. We have our first class, which you know is very personal. And of course, right down to our economy class, which we have a much larger
Which is not
travelers.
so personal.
We can't afford to, because being practical about it, it has to go with the value for money and the amount of things that we have to do, and also the level of service that we can give to each and every passenger. So that is just basically what is customization to me. But beyond customization, within each of that level and segment of customers that you have to engage, I think knowing them as an individual and what really make them tick and what they really need when they are in contact with you, that is that level of personalization. And of course, with technology and tool, this has been made easier over time because there are, in fact, every company has a lot more data than they can imagine they have. So without going through any other third party or even to the open space, there is already a lot of data that we are trying to synthesize and trying to make good use of. As taking Sam's point, data is really nothing if you just leave it sitting there, because it really, you have to piece them together to make some sense out of it, to take some actionable plans to really deliver that level of service that you want to deliver.
Thanks.
I like what you say there. We're constantly talking to customers now about the segment of one and the demographic of one. And if you think about yourself, you know, Angeline and I'm not making assumptions on your age because you're probably younger than me, but you know, we could be the same demographic, but we've got completely different desires. And I think that could be a whole nother topic for another panel.
You don't know that.
Well, I'll make some assumptions on some little things, but you know, that's another thing for brands. And I like what Sam said. It's like that white glove experience. And I'd almost challenge Singapore Airlines. Like, I think there'll be a day, maybe not too soon in the future, where it doesn't matter if you're in economy or first class, there will be that one-to-one segment of one experience. And I think for a lot of brands in the audience, you know, how do you start to push your organization to think about that experience of one? Because that's certainly where customers are expecting. And, you know, that's only going to continue to get more difficult, more expected, I think.
Thank you. Dave, do we have any questions? We've got
Up there,
2.5 minutes left. Ooh, I can't read them.
Can you read them?
What are the methods or tools that you use to understand your customers? Salesforce is the answer, but
I'm not going to answer this.
I'm going to merge those two. How does relevance get redefined in a world where large parts of the population may be only getting a universal basic income?
I'll try this. I would like to expand on Sam's point on the earlier part. We have done a lot of research in SIA, and there's no specific method or tools that we do employ, but the whole methodology is really adopting the balance between qualitative research and quantitative research. Because qualitative research is one that helps you to understand the inner needs of that customers, the emotions and that part that is not articulated in just pure numbers, right? And of course, with those needs, and we establish some of the key points, we use it to frame a survey that we go out for some quantitative validation. So that is one that we did for understanding the customers. And of course, it has to be done at various geographical areas because SIA is a global reach with our global network. So what we did is we look for key markets that we have to size up, and customers do have differences in terms of archetypes and in terms of personas in the form of their needs and their emotions.
Sure. So Sam, do you want to speak to the first question about how relevance get redefined when income levels are more universal?
So it's not just about the income levels, I guess. I think when we look at our retail, particularly given the fact that customers have much more information and wants different things, it's providing actually, it's going to be based much more on understanding their needs and preferences. When we have, for example, our retail format across different income levels, we still have to actually have similar products, but at different values and different desire levels and preferences. People today, because of the access to information, can get to know about products from different countries without ever having been there. So it's actually making sure that we service needs at the same time.
Thank you, Sam. I guess my extension to that answer would be that relevance can be defined, personalization can be defined as one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many. So as you get larger and larger segments economically or otherwise, you decide what level of personalization or customization you want to cater to, right? So I'd like to say that thing is telling me time's up. Please wrap up. So I will. Thank you very much, Jess, Sam, Angeline. Please give them a big hand and thanks to the panel.